We'll do a review in Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yud Ches, the volume 18. This is the fifth Sicha for the portion of Korach. The Rebbe explains over here that there is basically three levels in trying to connect the people with Kedusha. And there is the Kahuna connection, there is the Leviya connection, and then there is the leftover from the gifts we give to the Leviim, which is basically the mundane, what's left behind. The Rebbe discusses the argument of Korach, and the parsha that follows the argument of Korach was the gifts that the Eibishter gave the Kohanim. And the Rebbe asks, but the parsha continues with also the gifts of the Levim. What do the Levim's gift have to do with the Machlokes Korach? The Rebbe explains B'Pnimis Inyonim what Korach tried to do. He tried to make a separation between the Kohanim and the people, as the Rebbe will go into Barichas, explaining the different madregas and the response that it's also the gifts of the Levim, as the Rebbe will explain in detail. But the first ois, the Rebbe simply asks the question that it's mashma that the Levim's gifts that the Levim get is also a response to Korach's argument. And the question is, Korach's argument was only against the Kahuna. And he said he was a Levi already. So why would part of the response, Mela, the response of the Kahuna that was established as a response to the challenge, Korach challenged the Kahuna of Aaron. So Hashem gave the Kahuna as a confirmation, the gifts of the Kahuna. But why would the Eibishter also need to give the Levi? And the Rebbe will explain B'Pnimis Inyonim that what the challenge was. Let's look inside. We'll go step by step. Korach Hey Aleph. Wegen der Semichas HaParshios, the fact that the portions are close to each other, the portion of Korach, and also the Shaykhs, what is the connection? Over here, we start talking about, after we read the whole story with Korach, the Eibishter said, Avani hine nosati lecho es mishmeres rumoisai lechol kodshe b'nei Yisrael v'goymer. That Hashem is giving them to keep the Truma, the separation of the Truma, all the Kodshim of the Bnei Yisrael. The Kohanim get a part, they get the Truma, they get the Kodshim. The Chov Dalet Matnes Kahuna, the Pasuk talks about all the different presence of the Kahuna. What's the connection between the Machlokes Korach with the Kahuna? So the Gemara and Rashi brings down from the Sifri, not the Gemara Sifri, that there is a connection because the Kahuna was challenged and Hashem was sort of confirming the Kahuna. So what's the connection? The Inyan for Matnes Kahuna. So the all Inyanim that the Pasuk talks about the Matnes Kahuna. So how is that related to Machlokes Korach, to the argument and the fight that Korach brought about, or state for them in their parsha, which is stated previously in the portion? Zog der Sifri, so the Sifri says, or Rashi brings this up, it's also brought down in the Rashi, as nor dem vibo Korach v'irer ala Kahuna, after Korach came along, and he challenged the Kahuna, but the Eibishter gesagt, so Hashem responded, Hashem said, as the Kahuna von Aaron, that the Kahuna that Aaron has, is koisem v'choisem umale be'erkoyim. He will write it down, he will seal it, and he will even get it approved in court. That's it. But das is dur the matnes kahuna. That is through the gifts of the kahuna. That's the way Hashem shows that belongs to Kohen, and this has the strength, the force. Hashem has written and signed and brought it into court that this is complete. That is dosidur the matnas kahuna. That's through the question of kahuna. Because Korach argued and challenged the kahuna, the Eberster's response is, this is my writing and signing and bringing it in court. Okay, so that explains kahuna. But why would the pasuk follow up also with the gifts that the Levi gets, the Meiser, for example? Das ist der Tam of der Hemshach b'shayches und the matnas kahuna zu machlokes Korach. This is a reason for the continuation and the connection from the gifts of kahuna to the argument of Korach. Because Korach's argument was against the kahuna, and this is Hashem giving the matnas kahuna, as the Sifri and Rashi say. Was is ober the shayches von inyan hameiser was megit to Levi? But what is the connection to Meiser which is given to the Levi? Because the pasuk later on, after going through the different kahuna, the gifts over there, the pasuk also says the livnei Levi hinei nosati kol Meiser, and to the B'lei Levi with the vav, that to the livnei Levi I've given the Meiser. Steht bald noch. This says immediately following. Und in der selber Amira, and this goes together with the one saying, Hashem says, Hashem starts off there with the gifts of the Kohen. That's first, it enumerates many of the gifts of the Kohen, and then the pasuk further continues with the gifts of the Kohanim by saying, Ani chelkecha, I am your portion. What does it mean, I am your portion? So that is matnas, matnan the yahavis loch inun cholkach. The gifts that I'm giving you, that is your portion. So, and the gifts that they're talking about is the kahuna. This is the Loshen, the Rebbe said, Matnas Kuna, basically. So that means that the pasuk starts off, Ani Chelkecha, that Hashem is saying, I'm giving you the portions of the Kuna. And then the pasuk follows with the Bnei Levi. So how is that connected to Machlokes Korach? Because it seems that it follows the Matnas Kuna, follows also the Matonis that we give to the Levi. But Levi wasn't challenged. The Rebbe brings down here, matnas in Chulkoch, is because you could taich ani chelkoch, meaning I am your portion, Hashem is your portion. Then it doesn't necessarily go on the matnas kahuna. Then it may not follow the matnas kahuna. Then the Rebbe's question is not as strong. There's no Rashi over there, but the Targum Onkelos, the Rebbe says, is closer. He teaches is ani chelko matnas di'ayvin loch. So we're talking about that is your portion, which is the matnas kahuna. And then the pasuk continues that v'livnei Levi in a sati kol meiser. That's after the ani chelkacha. So what's the connection between the gifts of the Levi as they follow up the gifts of the Kohen to the Machlokes Korach? Why do we need the gifts of Levi to respond to Korach? Noch better. Furthermore, the Chayre need nor hodos kein shayches need to Machlokes Korach. Not only doesn't it seem that the gifts to Levi should have a connection to the Machlokes Korach, because Korach was a Levi himself. He didn't argue. He argued about the Kuna. This is opposite of what Machlokes Korach was. Korach wasn't arguing against Levi. Machlokes Korach is given nor ala Kahuna. The argument of Korach was completely only on Kahuna, on the Kohanim. As Moshe responded, "Ubikashtem gam Kahuna." You're asking for Kahuna also, which means it wasn't the Levi. Unitoif Leviya. It wasn't that they were asking Leviya. Because they didn't have to ask Levi because he was a Levi. But Korach Alein is doch given a Levi. He was already a Levi. Und noch von die Chashub Shabam, he was the important Levi. Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kahos, meaning the son of Kahos, of the three sons, Gershon, Kahos, and Merari, Kahos was the most important. And it was Amram over there, was a son of Kahos. So this was also from the important of the Levim. So it wasn't complaining about Leviah, only about Kuna. So maybe the Rebbe says maybe the reason we have to talk about it is because since that they were Levi, they were already distinguished, and this brought them to complain that they want Kahuna also, and maybe that's why one would think that they were diminished, and that's why he had to tell them, "You're getting your gifts." The Rebbe says no. You can't answer. It would seem that we could answer. Ados is taka mahai time agufa. That is taka for that reason, because it's not that they fought against the Levia, but for the reason they being Levim that are complaining. Ayois, as Korach is given from Shevet Levi, since Korach was from the tribe of Levi, und die Machleuk is gekommen von ihm und noch andere von Shevet Levi, and the argument came from him and others from the tribe of Levi. Und das Gufa was eine given Bnei Levi. The fact that they were Bnei Levi is given this Siba von Zeir Taino Machleukes. That was the cause, the reason for their argument and their fight. The Moshe to say gesagt, as Moshe said to them, Shimu no Bnei Levi. Listen, Bnei Levi, he's saying to them, Hama'at mikem, is it not enough for you? God has distinguished, separated you, the God of Israel, from the rest of the Jewish community, going there, to serve him. He brought you and your brothers, the sons of Levi, together. You also want Kuna. So since being the Levim seems to be the incentive that they had to go ahead and fight against Kuna too, because you see this Moshe Rabbeinu is rebuking them and says, not enough, you have the Levi. That seems that it's the Leviah that brought about their argument. So maybe we could make a mistake and think, as to leave them is chas v'sholem geminert geworden, that because of this, it was diminished von der Chashivas und Tafkid von Shevet Levi, from the importance and the mission of the tribe of Levi. Der Riber hat der Eberster zusammen mit Tzivu Matnas Kahuna, maybe so that together, as the Torah is telling, give them Matonis of Kahuna, angesagt euch geben Meiser Lebnei Levi Chulu. He also instructed to give Meiser to the sons of Levi. Was das lernt uns? That teaches us that the Bnei Levi is geblieben b'chashivusam, that the sons of Levi remained in their importance. They didn't lose anything because of their being complaint and argument, and they still got it. But the Rebbe says this is not really fit in the flow. Doesn't seem like this would be like two separate things. The Bnei Korah, the Kahuna were giving them to conform because they were fighting against it. The Leviah they're getting, the pasuk has to say, is because you might think that they lost it. It's mashma b'livnei Levi that this is all a response to the Korach's argument. It's however difficult to say so. But from them was the Torah zog dem inyan from Meiser is behemshach zu matnas kuna. The fact that the Torah tells us about Meiser as a continuation to the gifts of kuna. Und dazu noch mit Avav HaMoisiv, and as Livnei Levi, with it's a total follow-up, is mashma. So from this, it appears, it seems like as euch die Sheiches von Inyan HaMeiser LeLevim, So Machlokes Korach, that also this connection from Meiser to the Levium, that the Meiser that we give to the Levium, how is that connected to the argument to Machlokes Korach, is in themselves oifum betoichen, that is in the same way, same content with the Sheiches from Matnas Kahuna to Machlokes Korach, as the connection from the gift of Kahuna to the argument of Korach. It's not like a whole new thing. It's the same. It's the same response. We're responding as we're giving to the Kohanim, or we're giving to the Levim to respond because they're machlokes on Korach, not two separate aspects of it. The Hainu zum Madgish sein, v'lechatchila mailas Levi. In other words, we're trying to say the gift of Levi, just like we're trying to say the gift, the Maila of the Kahuna, that the Eibishter says this is established, that you get the Kahuna, so that you get the Levi, and not maybe you lost it and we're still giving you. Not just to caution us that, oh, we've taken away their advantage. No, the Pasuk is trying to say some advantage over here, a Maila, just like by the Kahuna. That's the flow. And Bechlal, just everyone wants to find the contents connection between the argument of Korach and giving them the gifts, not just to say, okay, we're going to establish Malaber Kohen, that you deserve it, you get it. But somehow these gifts to the Kohen and the Levi, they counter the argument of the Korach that he fought over here. Since all aspects of Torah are totally precise, you need to say, as the Sheikhus from Matnas Kahuna of the Levia, that the connection between the gifts of the Kahuna and Levia to the argument of Korach is not in an oifen kloli, not just in a general way, a connection, as we said, as Matnas Kahuna is a siman stam, that just the gift of the Kahuna, it has to be just a plain sign, veraya, and a proof. To strengthen Aaron's Kahuna after the complaint. That would be too not connected. That would not be responding to the actual machlokes. We're just saying, okay, you're right, and we're going to give you a sign. We want to find the contents. The Rebbe is going to say the gifts to the Kahuna and the gifts to the Levia actually represent the answer to the argument of Korach, not as that inhalt from Matnes Kahuna Ulevia, but the idea, the content of the meaning of Matnes Kahuna Ulevia has a connection to Machlokes Korach, to the argument of Korach. There is a content connection there. And gives a response to the argument of Korach. So, Emerson, to understand the response, the Rebbe Nois Beis is going to tell us what really did Korach want, what was his argument. And Rebbe is going to explain Korach wanted separations. Korach wanted that there should be no connection between the Kohanim and the Yidden, not to change, let the Kohanim be distinct and let the Jewish people distinct. The Kohanim don't need to interact and impact the Bnei Yisrael. Once we understand that, we understand how the gifts is a response to that. Shegeret Amo Ba'arucha, in them was steht in Neuem Melech. Once spoken already at length about what is written in the Neuem Melech, as der Inyan von Korach, that what is the idea of Korach, was der Targum Taich wie is Spalling Korach. Korach Taich, what is Vayikach Korach? Korach took Korach separate, is Spalling Korach. This is the same idea as the separation of the Rikia, which separates between the water and the water, making separations. Is al derech, so the Melech said, the Targum Taich Vispale Korach means that he split is similar with the Rekiya Hamavdil ben Maim Lamayim, that is similar to the sky, which is the firmament which separates between the waters and water, the water that are above the sky and the water below. Which basically the idea is Obtelun und Obscheden zwischen Elyonim und Tachtonim, to separate and to divide between the upper and the lower. Und in them is Bashtanen sein Machlokes of Kuhunas. In this consisted his argument on Aaron's priesthood. He wanted a kohen to be separate. Bald as a kohen is in ganzen abgescheidet von Inyone Olam, since a kohen is totally separated from world matters, and is farnum and nor mit kedusha zachen, he is totally occupied only. He's only occupied with holy matters. To use the language that the pasuk says, you separated Aaron to sanctify and make him kodesh kadoshim, him and his son. So that means that Aaron and his son are kodesh kohanim, are kodesh kadoshim. They are separated, distinguished. They're holy. They're separated from the world. Ubefrat, this is all kohanim, especially when we talk about the Aaron HaKohen Gadol. A feminine state, but Aaron HaKohen says umin hamikdosh lo yetze. From the mikdash shouldn't go out. So therefore, a kohen is spalig that Korach separates. He said, "Is madua tisnasu al kahal Hashem." Why do you raise yourself above the kahal Hashem? Meaning, why do you have anything to do with the kahal Hashem? Tisnasu, but don't bring it to the kahal Hashem. Don't bring it to the Yidden. So how and why? Why does there need to be an influence of that raising? Why does it need to impact your level al kal Hashem? Why does it have to do with kal Hashem? What does it mean? Meaning that their sanctity influence that the Yidden should also be sanctified as euch Yidden, as euch zei sollen sich aufheben, that they too should raise zu sein Muvdal von Inyone Ha'olam, to be separate from worldly matters, that they too should raise themselves. B'shas hazeh avodah. What is the Yidden's avodah? The Yidden don't need to be separated. It doesn't need to be tisnas al kal Hashem. You stay separate. The Yidden avodah is to vernehmen sich mit Dvarim Gashmim. Their job is to occupy themselves with physical matters, and make of them vessels to godliness. The Kohanim should not need to influence the Bnei Yisrael. Und der Riber, this explains also. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu saying Bagashtem Gam Kahuna? That means that they wanted Kahuna. They just finished saying Madua. They just said Madua Tisnas al Kal Hashem. How are they asking for themselves? So, but this explains because they weren't just asking that there should be no kahuna. They were asking that those who are kohanim should be separated and not have a connection. The kahuna that ubikashtem, that was asked by Korach and his group, was to have a kahuna in which they remain separate and aloof from the rest of the Bnei Yisrael, not to have them become kodesh as well. Und der Riber, and therefore, when they say, why do you raise al kal Hashem? Nit instead, that does not contradict to them, to the fact that they wanted to be kohanim. Weil Korach had gewollt an andere Suk from Kohuna. Korach wanted a different type, a different category of Kohuna. Azav was hot nit kein verbunden mit Kol Ha'eda, such that is not connected to the whole community, a distinguished, separate Kohuna. The Rebbe brings a few examples now that there could be leadership and that does not associate with the other. That doesn't associate with other people. It's just distinguished, like in the rabbin, like a rabbi, like Shammai. Some you find in kedusha. In kedusha, there is such a concept as Shammai. That when the goy came to convert to Shammai, so mitzat kabdonusoi, because Shammai was a very particular. So so he pushed him away with the stick of the building, didn't accept him, didn't want to go down. He says, "You don't belong here," pushes him away. That's a concept of not connection. This is in Kedusha. Un Beis Shammai b'mokim Beis Hillel Eine Mishnah. That Beis Shammai, wherever they disagreed, Beis Hillel is not a Mishnah because that's not really the way of Kedusha. Kedusha is not to be separated. Valinyonim is v'shom derech sheshekel dracha, because what Shammai does is the Lashon Shammai. Shammai comes from the Lashon v'shom derech sheshekel dracha, that you evaluate his ways, and it's very, very particular, and therefore he's not accepting from the others. But that's not in Kedusha. We go like Beis Hillel, but even in Kedusha. Another example, Rashbi v'chaverov. They were also distinguished and not involved in the world. Rab Shimon ben Yochai was Torosum Umnosum. They just learned Torah. And we know that that's not the way, because the Gemara, he says the person should learn Torah and Malachta the Eibishter Nasal de Achedim. The Gemara says, also be other. Many people try to do as Reb Shimon ben Yochai, not to work or not to hanig b'minig derech eretz, and they just learned Torah and that they weren't successful because that's not the usual way. We said that was Reb Shimon ben Yochai, but when he take his son Rabbi Elazar, as the Gemara says in Shabbos, that even after the 12 years, so when they destroyed, Hashem says, go back to the cave. But even on the 13th year, when they came out and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai no longer wanted to destroy, the people were occupied with worldly matter. He says, how could you do that? But then he realized, but his son didn't still get the message after going back for another year. Und Rabbi Elazar sein Sohn, and or Chaver of the other ones, is afilu noch 13 Jahr b'ma'ora, even after being 13 years in the cave, is Habemochi. He would destroy. Gemara says wherever Rabbi Elazar would destroy, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would heal. But that means he still didn't accept the world the way the world is. That's being an idea of being separate. So this concept of separation, of kahuna being distinguished and separated, is responded to by the Eibishter saying, no, there is the matnas kahuna, there is a connection between and an elevation of the gifts of the kahuna that we give to the kohen to raise up the yidden. The mitis musbar was the onzog of matnas kahuna. This explains why the instruction for the gift of kahuna is behemshech to machlokes Korach, is as a follow-up to the argument of Korach. Because the matnas kahuna dricken ois the shayches verbund, the gifts of the kahuna, they express the connection and the tie zwischen Yidden mit Kohanim, between the Yidden and the Kohanim. As Yidden geben sehr Eigentum zu the Kohanim, that Yidden give their own, what they own, their fortune to the Kohanim. They are separate from the worldly matter, and they didn't give them. There's haste, which means when you give them, as they haben oif that they raise the Yidden's physical matters. They become gifts for the kahuna. These, as if they zoktman ani genau. To the extent that we say that Hashem says, I am your portion, which means that the portions you give to kahuna, that's my portion. So you have raised them to the level that they become Hashem's portion that Hashem gives to the Kohen from the Yid. So the Yid raises his physical matters to become the portion of Hashem that's given to the Kohen. They give Zay zum Obersten. You're basically giving to Hashem. So the Rebbe says, why are we only giving a portion then? Why don't we give it all the ways? If Korach's argument was there needs to be a cut between the Kohanim and the Yidden, between the Elyonim and the rest, the Adas Yisrael, and we want to show to counter that, why are we just giving a part of it? I'll explain. This is seemingly not yet sufficient explanation. Let it be true that actually Korach argued on the kahuna, especially on the Kohanis kahuna. Zain kavona v'geder b'kahuna. What did he have in mind when he was fighting against the kahuna? He said that his intention, Zain kavona v'geder, what is his definition, boundaries of the kahuna? Thereby is the chaber given. What was by it? As that he wanted that there should be a connection by cutting and making a separation. There should not be no connection, no tie from the lower of the world with Elyonim, which means Kedusha Belakus, to be connected to holiness and godliness from Rome. So, to fit this, it would seem, how should we fix this? In a way, as the Inyonim von Welt sollen in ganzen weggeben werden zum Ebersten, that the world, matters of the world should be totally given away to Hashem, which would be a vollständiger Chibur von Elim v'Tachten. That would be a complete connection from the upper and the lower. Azach von Welt wird Kodesh l'Kamri. Something of the world becomes totally holy. That you give a part of it. As what would be the example that you give it away becomes totally holy? The Korbones, was mis makriv auf Mizbeach. Par dem Obersten, seine sie in ganzen Kodesh. They are totally holy. Aber nicht matnas kahuna bechlal, but generally matnas kahuna in general, besides the korbanos that you bring to the mizbeach, where the korban itself becomes holy, in general the matnas kahuna bazainen lachilas hanos kohanim. That's meant for eating the kohanim. This is don't have full kedusha over there. Some of them, even when you give to the kohen, don't have any kedusha in them. Some of the matnas kahuna. So, if we're trying to connect, why don't we make it all to the highest level of kedusha? And the Rebbe will go on to explain that there is actually, therefore, the matnas via, and there is also further the shiurim, what's left over, as the Rebbe will continue to explain. But now the Rebbe brings in also idea to connect it to Gimel Tammuz, which was also the beginning of the redemption, but yet it wasn't the full redemption, and it was still lacking the big part of being able for the Frierdiker Rebbe to celebrate the Nitzochen, of being able to give Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe will explain in the next Ois. Ois Gimel. Parshas Korach leint men bekam shonim in der Woche von Gimel Tammuz. The portion of Korach in many years, you read it in the week that the third day of Tammuz, or der V'haintiksyor, or as in that year, in them Togufa on the day of Gimel Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz was on Shabbos. Der Tog was the Rebbe der Schwer. That was the day that the Rebbe, my father-in-law, is befreit geworden von Tfisa. He was released from imprisonment in Yor Tov Reish Peizayin, in the year Tov Reish Peizayin, 1927. Ba'al-pi ha'yadua as altzis b'ashgocha protis. Based, it's known that everything is by divine providence, ubefrat lifi divrei hashalah, especially according to the words of the Shalah, as alle moyadim seinen merumes in the parshias, welche meleint in dem batreffenden zman, that all the holidays are hinted in the parsha which you read during that time. So that means that the Gimel Tammuz, which is the time that we read the Parshas Korach, has a connection to it. Is moving as der Teuchen von Tog hat a Sheiches zum Teuchen von Parshas Korach. So it's understood that the content of this day has a connection to the contents, to the idea of Parshas Korach. Leuten open the mountain beer in the meaning of Machlekes Korach. According to the above mentioned explanation, what Machlekes Korach was about, the idea, so then it would seem that you can explain the connection simply. Just like Korach was not bothered, he didn't care about the kahuna in of itself. Those was Kohanim Zainen moved von Inyon, the fact that they're separated from worldly matters. Zain Machlokes is gewenken, but what was his argument as said above? If them was Zaine Mashpia or the Kedusha to Kola Edo, the fact that they influence that holiness to the entire community. So that was the objection. What they objected is to give that Kedusha to the community. Similar was by divos the Rebbe had gehat from Zeidan, by those that the Rebbe had from them at the time, azoifil his nagdus v'ritiv, so much opposition and so much problems from them. Those was hot zei gestert, that which disturbed them was to leave them haben zei dem Rebbe arrestiert, and that's the reason they arrested the Rebbe. Is given nit sein avoide in Torah mitzvahs for sich la'atzme ba'atzme, was not for his service in Torah mitzvahs for himself and by himself, nor sein arbet in harbotzas HaTorah, but his work in disseminating and spreading Torah b'chol marchave midinosenu, in all of, quoting from the Rebbe, in all of the wide of our country, zwischen alle Eden seinen gemen yamult in the under Medina, amongst all Jews that were then in that country. Al derech zeh. So in a similar way, hot sein bafrayun gimel Tammuz gemeint. So what was the meaning of his freedom on the 3rd of Tammuz? As that Eibishter had by vision golui le'ein koil, that Hashem showed openly for everyone to see, as ken mamshich sein in sein arbet von harbotzes HaTorah, that he is able to continue his work for spreading Torah. Bedugme zu dem was der Eibishter hat herabgenommen. This is similar to what Hashem removed Umevatel gewend dem Irur from Korach, that and negated the complaints, the challenge of Korach, their meat was and is koisem v'choisem lochumale be'erkoyin, by writing and signing and bringing it up in court, the kahuna von Aaron's kahuna, so the Eibishter established that the Rebbe can go on with his Arbotzas HaTorah, which parallels the Eibishter's giving the Matnas Kahuna as evidence that the Kahuna is there, notwithstanding the challenge of Korach. But it would appear that it's not really similar to the above. Gimel Tammuz is doch noch nicht given the full Bafraim from Rebbe. On the 30th of Tammuz was not yet the full release from the Rebbe. Mer nit wie Bafraim from Tfisa. They just freed him from imprisonment, but he didn't go. He wasn't a free person. Worden is damals verschickt geworden in Golus, because then he was sent away into exile in Kastrama, to Kastrama. Wo hat nicht gekannt angehen mit seiner Arbeit, where he could not continue his work. To spread Torah as he needed to, as properly. Dos is erst gekommen, that first took place, that only came später later on, be Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, on the 12th and 13th of Tammuz. Und euch demult seine noch gewähren Schwierigkeiten. Even at Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz, there were also difficulties. Bis is weggefahren von Yana Medina, until he traveled away from that country. Musman Zogen, so therefore we need to say, we have to, at the Endlichkeit von der Geula von der Rebbe, that the similarity of the redemption of the Rebbe mit dem Inyan von Koisa v'choisum lochumale berkoyim, which Hashem says, I will write and seal for you, and I will bring it up into court. Kuhunas Aaron is verbunden. The Kuhunas Aaron is still tied with them tail from their Geula, with that portion of the redemption, is noch given al kolponim b'chitzonius, that it's that part of the redemption that still remained, at least externally. It seemed like he was still partially incarcerated, partially not free. In the Hagbolis from Golus, by the limitations of exile, by those who arrested him, so he was still under their control. So, what's going on? So the Rebbe is going to go back now, explaining the idea of the Matnas Kahuna, to explain how Dafke there is an advantage in the situation when the Geula reaches even at that level when you're not fully free. And the Rebbe starts off by explaining first that why is there a need to only give a part to the Kohen, also the Meiser? Why can't you just give it all away? We will understand this by introducing a simple question, seemingly. About the general idea of the gifts of the kahuna, similar to Matnes kahuna v'sa'id gita vek dem kohen. The gifts of the kahuna that a yid gives to the kohen, seine nor bashtimta, gor kleine chalokim von Eden's nechasim. They are just designated, very small parts from the assets of a Jew. What do we have to give away? Small parts, all the gifts of the Kohen. Afilu truma chala ukayetze b'zeh. Even when we take the truma and the chala, the zachen was medav gem reishis dem kohen, which the first you give to the kohen, the truma, the chala, otos hashir. It's still, you give it first, but there is a measure. Sedar zayin the reishis. Yes, it needs to be reishis. Unafilu mit Rabbanon is betruma, and even Rabbanon, even the best Ein Yofe, is one of 40. That means 39 remains for you, and one goes to the Kohen. Similarly, also by Chala, you give 140. Aber nicht weggeben seine zwei im Ganzen als Truma, not to give it all away as Truma, as darf sein Shireo Nikorim. You have to be able to tell that there's leftover. It's only called Truma. If you give away more and you can't say that you separated, you don't see that you separated something to the Kohen. It needs to be Shireo Nikorim. Balderach ze benegeit zu Meiser. Similar when we give Meiser, is dos nor. You only give how much? At Zentel for seine Petersen for only 1/10 from your fruits and grain. But the would seem we can understand that there's a measure below not to give less. As that you're not allowed to give less than the amount is moving. We understand. Why would there be a number ashir above as a tornish that you're not allowed to give away and consecrate from your assets to Hashem? You're not allowed to give all away. And some of them you're not allowed to give it matter from shir. You're not allowed to give more than the measure. You have to give exactly the amount. As we say, our sage is not by estimate. You have to give exact. So why is that unnecessary? Bizas the Rambam paskent to the extent that the Rambam rules. A person should never consecrate or make chedem all of his assets. One who does so violates the pasuk. Anybody who gives out money for mitzvahs, but you can't give more than a fifth. Why is that? Why do we have a limit not to give more, not to give less? Okay, why not more? So the Rebbe explains now the difference between Kohanim and Levim. Hey, the Bir B'chol Anal, the explanation in all the above. As is Mevur in Chassidus, it's explained in Chassidus. Der Chelek, Mevur in Chassidus, der Chelek zwischen Kohanim und Levim. The difference between the Kohen and Levim, as a Kohen is in Yonei Isha Chesed. A Kohen, his matter, he's a man of kindness. Und in Yonim Shel Levim is that the idea of Levim is Gevura, is stringency. Und Korach was is given a Levi, and Korach that was a Levi, hat mit sein Machloikes of Kohunas Aaron. His argument, what did he want to accomplish with his argument on the Kohuna of Aaron? He wanted to overpower Gevuris, the stringency over Chasodim. As the Levim zon zayin anstatt die Kohanim, that the Levim should be instead of Kohanim. What does this mean? Avoidus Adam is the chilek between chesed and gevura in the service of man. What's the difference between chesed and gevura? Chesed is in yonei hashpa milmai lamat. Chesed's matter is to give from above to below, the level of shuv, return, invelt, go back into the world. And gevura is in yonei halo milmato lamayl. Gevura main aspect is to bring up from below to above. Rotzui, to run, a race game from Vel, to go out of the world. Wanted Gevura to overpower Chesed. When their Shoirish from Tainus Korach is given, And the root of Korach's argument was, as der Iker soll sein der Inyan HaGevura, that the main thing should be the idea of the stringency, the avodah for Rotziv Aliyah, that service of running and elevation. Korach had gehalten, Korach was of the view, as tachtoinim wie sie seinen in Zeir Mitzias, that the lower ones, as they are in their Mitzias, seinen nit ken kelim tzalikus, they are not vessels, vehicle to godliness. Und der Riber darf bei sie sein Rotzui. And that's why by them there needs to be running a Reusgehen von dem Maime du Matze von Mato und Eule sein Tzalikus. And they need to leave their standing and their position from being mato, being low, and they have to go up to godliness, the level of rotzi. So now we're saying that he wants gvura for them to go up, but before we said that he didn't want the Kohanim al Kal Hashem to raise the people. The Rebbe explains, he's considering zu dem was sich gerät frier. This does not contradict that which we said earlier, and explained elsewhere. As the machloikes from Korach is given, that the argument of Korach was, of them was the Kohanim, that the fact that the Kohanim befrat Kohen Gadol, Rufa Rois by Ali Eden, that they are the one that call out and bring out by all Yidden, by all Jews, that movement of raising sein durch their avodah lamata in Welt, through their service below in the world. Didn't want the Kohanim to bring that elevation through their work. They wanted it to be separate. Warum? It's not a contradiction. Warum vibaldos kum durch de peula von Aaron HaKohen. Since that raising from the world comes from the act of Aaron the Kohen, Isha Chesed, was is mashpia, a man of kindness, who gives the flow, mamshich elakus milmato, milmaito lamato, and gives godliness from above to below in the tachten, in the lower level, is b'mitziusay, as he is in his standing, in his being. Tuter the riber oiv. So therefore, what does he accomplish when he raises? As the tnua fun halo by in, that movement of elevation by the yid is nit beoifun as geta rois fun mato. It's not in a way that he goes out from being low, that he's no longer low, nor as the mato b'matsovi verta keli tzalakus, but rather that the one below, as he is below, becomes a vessel to godliness. It's not leaving, not becoming mata. You stay mata, but you elevate it. They remain your deeds, dynamizing l'shem shamayim, or b'chol drachecha, your dyna drachim de'eyu. So, he didn't want them to remain, however, the Levi, the Korach, didn't want them to remain in the mata. They want them to be rotzui, that they should leave out, because when it comes through Aaron, even though he brings about an elevation, but he brings an elevation, not that they change, they're no longer mata, but in the mata he brings godliness. Time, and for that reason is their Abschlag Tikkun of Machloikes Korach. So what is the rejection? How do we knock down this argument? How do we fix Machloikes Korach? Nit durch Korbanos v'Kochim, was Megita weg in ganzen zum Eibschen. That is not through Korbanos and Kochim that you give totally to Hashem. Mis das makriv mizbeach, that you give it on the mizbeach, to make it totally holy, to lose so you're not mato. Nor durchen inyan for matnas kunadavke, to specifically by the gifts of the kohuna. Mashenkein in hakrobas hakarbonas ubechlolus the inyan from kochim. When you offer karbonas And in generally, when we talk about kochim, Vasaid is magdis and nechosm la'avaya, when a yid consecrates his assets to Hashem, zoktzich nit arois, then it does not express as al zvorim tachtonim gashmim, that as physical matters, that they become a vessel to godliness. Because they are leaving weekly and they become kodesh. So you don't see that choil becomes elevated because it's no longer choil, it becomes a lakus. They are leaving choil from their connection to the person below. They become holy. You bring them mizbech. That doesn't express that the physical become a vessel to godliness. As opposed to the gifts of kahuna, as opposed to kochim, but matnas kahuna, was a mensch geht weg von sein Vermögen zum Kohen. He gives away from his belonging, from his fortune, from what he owns, he gives away to the Kohen. Und der Kohen esst es, and the Kohen eats it. And it's very by em lemoshcha legdula. Pasuk says he eats it in a way of lemoshcha, which means in a great, in an honorable way. Like the kings eat it. Which means generally, this would be also not just eating. These as kama from the matnis kahuna was seine neue to the extent that several of the gifts of the kahuna, which also apply in chutzlar, bleiben chulin. They remain unconsecrated altogether. Afke in them is nikir of mudgash. Specifically in this is recognizable and emphasized as oich b'matzavim from inyonim de lamata al chulin, that also in their condition, being matters below chulins and as a shaykh tzalakus, there's connected to godliness. In Oizvav, the Rebbe continues to explain that even the matnas kahuna still do not fully reflect that the physical lower items become to Hashem, while it is less than korbanos, which become mamish holy, and we're trying to get the dvorim tachtonim gashmim connected, and that comes through the matnas kahuna. In order to really get the dvorim chulim, we need the gifts to the Levi. That's the hemshech of the pasuk, that the connection with even in dvorim tachtonim that are not holy. All of these matnas kahuna, even the Rebbe is going to go through the different levels, but they're all at the end of the day designated to Hashem, and then it goes to the Kohen. As opposed to the matanos that we give to the Levi remain totally chulin, and that would be a more accurate and response and a deeper response to Korach, to have even the Gashmis, the remaining Gashmis, thing connect them to Hashem. Both. Aber euch by matnas kahuna is noch nicht mudgesh betachlis ubeshleimus, but also when it's talking about the gifts of kahuna, it's still not emphasized completely and wholesomely as euch dvorim tachtoinim, that also lower items. Wie sie sein b'matzav de mato, as they are in a situation of mato, werden sie verbunden mit Elokus, that they are tied with godliness. We don't have it yet fully from the matnas kahuna. For that, we need the matnas levia that the pasuk is mamshech. But the Rebbe explains now why the matnas kahuna. Aleph, Rov matnas kahuna. The most of the matnas kahuna, where the matnas kahuna are divided. The 24 matnas kahuna. There is 10 of them in the Migdosh. There's 4 in Yerushalayim and 10 big vulim in all places in all of Eretz Yisrael. So The Eser b'Migdosh v'Arba b'Yerushalayim. Those are the majority, 10 and 4. There's different divisions also, but the Rebbe is using this division. The Rambam, the Rebbe in the notes mentions the 10 that were in the Migdosh and the 4 in Yerushalayim. Werden frier Kodesh. First they werden frier Kodesh. First they become holy. Und erst danach kommt der Chiyuv vom Geben sie zum Kohen. Then the obligation comes to give them to the Kohen. Und die Kohanim is Meshulchan Gavoya Kazoch. And the Kohanim, they merit from Hashem's table, which means it's already holy, and then they eat from Hashem's table. Azoy oich truma. The same thing is with when we talk about truma, which is all of Eretz Yisrael, and then bikurim, the first fruits, unchala, the first of the dough, is doch bazei freyer haromo nisin Hashem. First, you have to separate, and you give it to Hashem. Und erst danach kommt der Gebenes zum Kohen. And then only you give it to the Kohen. With their posik is madgish b'parsha saying, as in our parsha with regards to Chala, the posik emphasizes reishis masher yitnu laHashem. The first one, that which they give to Hashem, l'chonesat by giving to you. So first they're given to Hashem. That's by the posik of Chala. And by Bikuri Koil Asher Ba'artzom, over there the pasuk talks about the Bikurim Asher Yaviu LaHashem. So first it says they bring to Hashem, and then it says L'choyiyu, then they will be to you. And by Truma it says Titnu LaHashem Truma, you give to Hashem the Truma. So all in these matonis, the Truma, the Chala, and the Bikurim, all are given to Hashem, and then the Kohen gets them. Unafila by Gezel Hageir, when you don't have who to return, because this was stolen from a convert. He has no inheritance, so you don't have who to return to, and you give it to the Kohen. Is freer Konei Hashem. Over there too, first Hashem acquires it. Und später gibt man das zum Kohen, and later on you give it to the Kohen, as the Rebbe brings the source for this in the notes, that, so that's number one. So those are from these 4 now, which apply to all over Eretz Yisrael. Those are the 10 B'Gebulim. Over there, there's an emphasis that they're first given to Hashem, and then the Kohen gets it. Now the Rebbe is going to say, and even the rest, the leftovers that are not emphasized that they go to Hashem, they go straight to the Kohen. So it's chulin. Base apilu the ibrike matonis from the Eser B'Gebulim. Even the other gifts of the 10 that are in all of Eretz Yisrael. Seinen ze doch Sachen, so they are items, they are items, was noch seindig b'rishus Yisrael, gehören sie schon zum Kohen, that while they are still in the Yid's possession, they already belong to the Kohen. Even while the Yid possesses them, but they still belong to the Kohen. Such as v'matonis, Zroya L'chaim V'Keva. Those are from that belong to the Kohen, the leg, jaw, the stomach, which belongs from every animal, or Zdei Achuza, that goes to the Kohen, inherited land that is by Yovel, is not redeemed, and the halacha that goes to the Kohen, or Zdei Charabim, a sada which one makes a chedem, donates it to the there's one chedem that goes to the Kohen. There's a chedem Hashem, but there's a chedem for the Kohen. But these are all from the gifts of the Kohen. So these gifts, even while they're still in the Jewish ownership, they are still they already belong to the Kohen. Neisuf lozeh was matones usdei achoze. That's an addition. So those are not yet the chlal. Those are not the gifts that we know yet, the matones kahuna, because the matones and Zroy L'chaim V'kevo and Zdei Achuv Verni Demon B'forish B'Parsha Seinu. They're not amongst those gifts of the kahuna that the Parsha enumerates over here in Parshas Korach. Umatones Zayin V'Chazal Zogun, and the fact, why do they get the matones? They actually happened later. Our sages of Arbundum with Maisa Pinchas was given Shpeta. That is associated with the story of Pinchas, which took place later on. So they wasn't even there yet. So therefore, all of this does not yet really bring out the connection to Chulin, to weekly that they're given to the Eberster as gifts. The Riber werd behemshach lezeh gezogt in der Parsha. That's why, as a follow-up to this, to the Matnes Kahuna, the Parsha says further, Oich der inyan for Meiser Levim, also this aspect of the tithing that you give to Levim. What is unique about this tithing was Aleph. Because number one, Oich nochen abscheden, abgeben der Meiser zum Levi, even after separating and giving it to the Levi, like those Chulin Gemurim, it still remains totally Chulin. So, number one, was ein Kedusha klal, there is no Kedusha at all, since Mutter Lezorim, it's permissible to be eaten, or non-Levim. And so that demonstrates the fact that it's totally remains Chulin. And Beis is nit kein Chelek Mesuyam was gehert zum Levi noch farder afrosh von Eden. It is not a specific part that belongs to the Levi even before the separation from the Yid. It doesn't have, he's not there beforehand. So there is no real any kedusha or any connection to the Kohen Levi, and yet you connect. But this is noch mer madgish. This emphasizes more as oich hametzias was is noch chol gomer, even an entity which is totally weakly, tachtoinim mamish, totally below is oich verbunden mit den Ebersten, that is also connected with Hashem. Der mit was megidos zum Levi, the fact you give it to Levi was Hashem unachlose. Hashem is his inheritance, and you give it to the Levi. So you're connecting tachtoinim mamish, which have no connection, and you bring this to Hashem nachlose. You bring it. That's the gifts that you give to the Levi. In Oy Zayin, the Rebbe will bring out that there is even a further and a lower level to connect to Hashem, which is even lower than the level of Meiser, which is the level of leftover. Because at the end of the day, the Meiser, that there's a mitzvah to give it, so that alone makes it into a special connection. But to have the leftovers, that is which is yours, and to have the shirayim, what's left over, connect that to Hashem, that's the real tachtoinim. That's like the level of b'chol drachecha de'ehu, as the Rebbe will explain. Zayin. Eine von der Teines mit welcher Korach hat angeheben sein Machlokes of Kuhunas Aaron. One of the arguments with which Korach began his argument on the Kuhuna of Aaron is given Talis Shakula Tcheles Mahu Shetehei Petura Min Hatzitzis. He asked him if there is a talis which is made totally out of these tchelis wool instead of one strand we need, and he made the whole talis of tchelis. So he says, should it be exempt from tzitzis? Is mavur tanose in Chassidus? What is the argument of Korach with the talis? And Chassidus explains that inyan from talis levush kula tchelis. When we talk about a talis, this is a garment. The garment that is all of tchelis points vice to bechinas makif. It shows on a level that surrounds. And his argument is unan inyan von makif darf in them need sein kein tzitzis. From makif you don't need tzitzis. That's the argument of Korach. Chutim was ziehen sich von them. There's no need to have strands that are drawn from the makif. You don't need to have hamshocher bipnimius in the inside. Doesn't need to be in the inner. Und der mit hat gewollt herausbringen sein Machlekes of Kunasar. And this is how he wanted to express his argument on the Kahuna of Aaron, that Makifim are sufficient, but you don't need Shocha Pnimius from the Makifim Ves is Mevuer in Chasidus Ba'aruch, as explained at length in Chasidus. What does this mean, this argument? In Avodas Hashem, Bedakus, on a refined way, in our service of Hashem, Meintas Oich, in addition, it also means that Bishas the Avoida von Zichuch HaMetzias von Aiden kommt mit Zad HaMshochas HaOir Milmailon. That means it's just the Makif. That was Korach's time, but Moshe, we need a coin. We need to have Mamshech B'Pnimis. What does it mean? When you have the level of refining the Metzias from Eden, when you refine it, that it comes because of the above, because of the Makiv, because of the light from above. Nit mitzad dem Odom ha'oived milmata l'mayla, not from the person. The person who is serving from below to above is choch as ervert miyuchad mid elikus, although he becomes united with godliness, vibald ober as dos kumt milmayla, since it comes from above, is dos legabe zayin metzias an inyan for makif. So therefore, relative to his metzias, his existence, it's surrounding. It did not come from him. So that means, even though from above connects him, but it's not him connecting. It's somebody from the outside, from above, connecting him. As felt the hamshacha b'pnimius, you're lacking bringing in the inside. That can only be accomplished when you are doing it from your mitzias, not when it comes from above. Based on this, we can say, as bedakus, in a refined way, is oich den inyan for meiser, that also the idea of meiser, which we say is chulin, and it's before the hafrosha, the kohen, the Levi has no rights to it, but still is noch nit den ganzen maspik als tikkun machlokes korach. It's not entirely sufficient to correct the argument of Korach. Nor medarf euch haben dem inyan was matnes kuhuno meiser seine maspil mata. We also need the idea that the gifts of kahuna meiser, what they influence below. Not enough what you get. You need the matnes kahuna, how they impact on the lower level and what's left over, not what you give away. That they emphasize and what they bring out as it relates to the other part of the assets was bleiben by the Yid, that remain by the Yid. Not about the part that is given away, but this is emphasized and brought out by the part that's left by the Yid. Matnes kuhuno nazoich meiser matnes kuhuno so meiser kshela atzmom. Just they alone, because of the matone, not what's left over, but the part that you give. Vibald as a Yid is a mekayim derfar. Since a Yid fulfills them because was a zainen mitzvah Hashem, the mitzvah Hashem, derfar ver durch ze nit arois gesagt b'shleimus. That's why through them it doesn't completely express as euch dvorim gashmim wie ze gefinnen sich in ganzen in zeyer geder v'tzir mata, that also physical items as they are in their definitions and in the shaped way they are below, Veren kelim lelokus, that they also become vessels of godliness. They don't express that lower level, that even the Gashmis, as they are in their lower form, Veren kelim lelokus. To move on, that they become vessels of godliness, you don't express that. You move on from them was Somru Chazal. You can also understand it like by the saying of our sages of blessed memory. Afilu b'negei tzedakah, even as far as tzedakah. Tzedakah belongs to you, and you give it to the poor person. But yet, as nochun tzivu of meiseris, or this is with regards to meiseris, is a chelik from momen unechosim vos melchatchila yehertes nitzuhim. That once there is a command that you have to give it, that means it doesn't belong to you anymore. It's only as a deposit by you. Conceptually, you don't really own it before either, because it's a mitzvah to give it. So once it's a mitzvah, you're just holding it for the time that you'll give it. That when, however, when you separate and you give the kahuna, the gifts of kahuna and the gifts of meiser, and they emphasize, as Choch the Iber gebliebene Geherzu mentioned, that although the leftover belongs to the person, for seine Hitztarchusen, for his needs, zu benutzen sich mit sei, to use it with them, is as der Far, weil der Eberster hat sei ihm zugeteilt. He recognizes this. Why are you using it? Because Hashem is separated for you. Und der Gufe werden sie durch ihm mato, and that's why, because the Eberster gave it to him, so that's why these pieces that are his, that are on the lower level, they're not separated to Hashem, they're utilized as if the Eberster will, as Hashem wants them. Durch them dafki zer megala, that's how specifically, only that way you reveal as dvorim gashmi mamish, that also physical items, actually, these bleiben in ganzen aruchush for mention, as they remain completely assets of the person in der bechina von dachtonim, in the level of the lower ones, werden bepnimius in ganzen verbunden mit alakus, are in inner totally connected with godliness, in an oifam from bechol drachecha dei, in a way of knowing Hashem in all your ways. Durch them für sich the shleimus von dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim. That's the way you complete the dira in the tachtonim, the lowest level. B'chol drachecha de'ehu, that even what you use for yourself, you're doing it because the leftover, that's part of a mitzvah. And perhaps that's why there has to be, the Rebbe says, leftovers, because you have to express not only your connection through the part that you give, but you can express the connection to the part that's left over. You can say possibly that those goofy is their tam. That alone, this is actually the reason for sai by matnas kahuna, sai by meiser, whether it's the gift of the kahuna or it's meiser, is dashir kotsu, there is a set amount. When I mentioned a person is not allowed to give away all of his assets that the Rebbe spoke earlier. Or die Verbundenkeit mit der Lekus in die Nechosi, because the connection with godliness in these assets is in an under oifun, it's in a different way. Can't give it all away. That's one connection. You have this is a deeper connection. The other connection, wie in die, was darf wegem, then in those that he has to give away. Und der Riber is chosa toid al Manish Yisrael. We say Hashem is very protective about the money of the Yid, because the Yid has to use that money in his way. They should be sorted out in the right way. So not as a gift to the Eibush, as a using, as you should use it. And that's the way to connect to Hashem, to using it and realization that Hashem is giving it to you to use it for your consumption, for your use. And the Rebbe continues now in Oitz Ches to give these three levels in another similar situation as we talk about in Chassidus. We have Yechudei Lo, Yichud Tato, and then Yichud Law combined with Yichud Law. We're talking here about three levels. We're talking about Kochim that become holy. We're talking about Matnis, Kuhuna, and Meiser, who are not Kodesh, but they are become a mitzvah. And then we're talking about the Vodim Gashmi that are left from what you separated it off. And they are represented by the three levels of Achdus Hashem, Yichud Lo, Yichud Tato, and Yichud Lo, Yichud Tato together. As the Rebbe will explain, it's either the realization that everything is Kodesh, the world is Kodesh, the Matal Maila, or the realization that even the Gashmi is separated to Hashem. And then we have the higher level, the level of the connection of Yichud Lo, Yichud Tato, that even the physical doing becomes a level of Kedusha. Let's look inside. Ches. Amein v'dugma to the drei inyonim hanal. Something similar, a similarity of this idea to these three aspects. What are the three aspects? We're talking about kochim mamish. That's when you korban, for example. And then the second thing is the majority and the main of the matnas kuhuna meiser, of the gifts of kuhuna meiser. That's the second level. And the third level is und the nechosim was bleiben by dimension, and the assets that remain by the person. And these three in madreges in Achdus Hashem, how in the steps of the unity, in the unity of Hashem. Yeshloima dozayin and derinyan, we can say that this is the matter of von Yichud Havaya Echod, that unity of Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, milmata l'maylo, from below to above. And then you have Havaya Echod, milmaylo, lamato, from above to below. And then we have the union, Yichud, from Yichud Lo and Yichud Tato, the connection, the union of these both Yichud and Lo and Tato. These are very needless to say, they're very difficult and a very deep Chassidus Sikha, and doing the best we can. That inyan fun Havaya Echod b'derech aliyah milmata l'mayla, the idea when you say Hashem Echod in the way of elevation, which is milmata l'mayla, is that's like the first level of kochim. As oich noch is havus ha'olam is that even after the worlds were created, zane the olam is bottled b'mtzias betachlis, the worlds are totally negated of existence, totally the kodim is havus, just like before they were created. Das heißt, what does that mean? As nivroim zane be'emes came at nit, that the creation are really not truly in existence. Unzeir MSM Itzias is Vizizainen Lamailo, their true entity as they are above in Atzilus. So everything is like in Atzilus. In Biyad, there's really no entity over there. Was das ruft arois? What does this call the person once you come to that realization? The avoida from precious v'havshote from Yona Holam, the service of separation and the undressing of worldly matters. This is Chayev Avodas HaTzadikim. That's the life and the service of Tzadikim. Was eine Mufshat von Yonim Gashmim, who are removed, undressed, not covered by physical matters. They are living with godliness. Der zweiter Eifel von Havaya Echod. The second way of Havaya Echod, b'derech hamshocha milmayla lamato, when it comes in a way of drawing down from above to below, is via lakus, is mispasha to melubash yadazah. That is how godliness expands and dresses up in every item. What does that mean? Das heißt, is farana metzias from Welt. That means there is an existence of the world. Aber the metzias guf is alakus, but the metzias itself is godliness. Und die Darge, that's like separating the Matnes Kahuna Meiser and making it that it's godly. Und die Darge von Yichud ruft Aroisen Avoidem. What does this level of unity bring out, calls out in the service? Nicht abzuscheiden sich vom Welt, not to separate from world. Nor Adarabah, the contrary. So ton midvarim gashmim, to work with the physical matters. Is nene von dover gashmi. He's benefiting from the gashmistic item. Nor the hano is hano likis, but it becomes a godly benefit. It's a pleasure of elikus. But also this unity, choch, that is mitten dover gashmi, even though it's with the physical matter, der härter es aber wie zwei besondere Sachen shenisachdu. He senses it. He hears them as two separate things that have been united. Elikus and dover gashmi is godly and physical. Mitzad dem yichud from yichud love yichud tato. When you have the yichud of both of them together, is nirgash with the mitzias agashmi. Then you can sense that this physical entity and his doing and his pleasure are becoming godliness. So that's not even separate. That is in the level of the yichud of yichud lo and yichud tato. Oistes. Apikol hanal can mevair sein. Based on all the above, we can explain the shaychus from Gimel Tammuz Davke to Parshas Korach. The connection of Gimel Tammuz when there was not yet that full redemption, and that's specifically connected to the portion of Korach. The Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz on the 12th and 13th of Tammuz, wenn man hat dem Rebbe in ganzen befreit, when the Rebbe wasn't totally freed. Euch von Golus Kastrama, also from the exile Kastrama, drückt sich nicht aus beschleimus, that does not really express fully, completely, the Arbeit von Harbotzes HaTeure v'Hayadus, how the work of spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit hat gepoilt euch auf die Tachtonim, how it impacted also the lower ones, was haben ihm arrestiert, one who arrested him, as euch sei sollen auf dem maskim sein. That they too are agreeing to that. Warum demult is doch der Rebbe begila reis von Zere Dal Damas, because at that point the Rebbe openly has already gone out of their 4 cubits, which means he was no longer under their jurisdiction. Although the Rebbe says, Choch, as b'Medina hi b'chlal, in that country generally, they did against Yidden Yiddishkeit, but directly against the Rebbe, once he was free, he was out of there. But Davke Begimel Tammuz, it's specifically on the 3rd of Tammuz, when they haben im Parshik in Golus Kastrama, when they exiled him into the exile Kastrama. Foreign die Kahin, and as he was journeying over there, hat noch fahren even before he came there, eingeordnet, he already organized, as mir soll dorten zunächst bleiben ingelacht, that you should gather together children, boys, machen a cheder, to make a learning group, verrichten die mikveh, to fix the mikveh, gesorgt Chassidus dorten, and set Chassidus there. Davke in dem hat sich ausgedrückt, that specifically in that expressed as Tachtoni Mamish, that the lower Mamish, wie sie stehen noch in sehr niedrigsten Zier, as they are standing in their lowest form, they halten noch dem Rebbe bei sich in Golus, they still hold the Rebbe in exile, so they're still in control, and yet, seine Maskim Mefarbotzes hat Teure Vayadus from Rebbe, and they agree for the spreading of Torah and Yiddishkeit of the Rebbe. Bedugma zum Shleimus Hatikun, that is similar to the wholesome correction was at Rob genommen mevatel gewen machlekes Korach that took down and negated the argument of Korach as oich borim gashmim, that also the physical items wie sie seinen in zeir metzias von tachtonim mamish, that as they are in their existence, as they are in the lowest, they're actually lower. They too in their inner are godly. And now the Rebbe is going to tie it to a teaching that the Alter Rebbe, that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave on his way to Kastrama, which is based on this explanation that will be understood based on the explanation that the Rebbe gave. Yud, apia kol anal yeshloimar. Based on all of the above, we can say, as the drayin yonim hanal, these three above mentioned aspects, was mevatel given, mesaken given machlekes Korach, which negated and fixed this argument of Korach, seinen bechlolus merumes oich in their Torah generally. This is hinted, these three levels in the teaching was the Rebbe gesagt, and the Rebbe said, Arois gein dik von Tfisa, when he left imprisonment, Baron opfern in Kastrama, before he left to go to the exile to Kastrama. And this is quoting what the Frierdiker Rebbe said over there. Mir beten ba Hashem Yisbarach. We ask, we beg by the blessed Hashem. Yehi Hashem Elokeinu kasher hoyu im aviseinu. May God, our God, be with us as He was with our fathers. Al yasveinu val yichenu. He shouldn't neglect us. He shouldn't push us away. Hashem Yisbarach soll sein mit uns. May the blessed Hashem be with us in Yiddish. Wird sein mit uns. And He will be with us. He translates the words Yehi. He should request and a promise. He will. Wird sein mit uns. Asher hoyohim aviseinu, as He was with our fathers. Hagam mir seinen doch nicht gleich zu aviseinu, although we are not compared, we can't compare ourselves to our fathers. Welche seinen gewen bali mesidas nefesh bepoel mamish, who were people, masters of literally self-sacrifice, actuality. That was the saying that he gave. The Rebbe there are certain questions in the language in this teaching that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave. By first introducing the Lechoire, darf man verstehen. It seems like this needs to be, we need to understand. Number one, Aleph, in Loshen Habakoshe, the language of the request, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu imonu gomer. We say, may Hashem Elokeinu be with us. Why are we saying, what are we asking? We're asking Hashem to be with us, we understand, but Elokeinu is with us already. Let's see. Bishloim Hashem Havaya. We understand Yehi Hashem the Shem Havaya, but meint as the Eibishter is Hoya Hoya that He is, was, He was, is, and will be all in one instance. Elokus was is Hecher fun Hoben Nashayches to Welt. That's godliness which is beyond having a connection to the world. Darf man noch dem Moisiv sein. So then we have to add Umeidia sein as is imanu, that He is with us. Shem is with us, will be and is with us. But why do we also say Lekeinu? Mashenke Shem Lekim was sein Taich is. The Taich Lekim is meaning as is Taki v'amitz, that He is powerful and He is strong. That He has the powers, the abilities in the upper and the lowers. And we say Elokeinu, our power, is doch der Pirush. So what is the meaning when we say Elokeinu? Just by translating Elokeinu as der Eibishter is Kechenu v'chayuseinu. That Eibishter is our power, our energy, our vitality. Weißt es doch as der Eibishter is mituns, that points that they are with us. Is lechoyre nit noitig zu meisiv sein the word imonu. So it's not important to add Yi Elokeinu imonu with us. What do you have to say? It's Yi Hashem imonu, but Elokeinu is imonu. There's a Gedab Stein, Yi Hashem imonu. Either Yi Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem will be Elokeinu, that means already he's Archayis. Or Yi Hashem imonu, but why Elokeinu imonu? Number two, base, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu imonu. When we say be with us, is the Shaloi Berech Mer. This is much, infinitely, unmeasurably more. Unal Yazvenu Val Yichenu. It follows: don't forsake us, don't neglect us, don't push us away, but be with us is a much stronger and greater. Why do we start with Elokeinu imonu? And then we say Yazvenu Val Yichenu. Gimel. The Rebbe had gesagt, the Rebbe said, "Hagam mir seinen doch nicht gleich zu Aviseinu," although we are not compared, we don't compare to our fathers. Doch seine Gewen Bale Mesiras Nefesh bepoil mamish of Torah mitzvahs, who had literally self-sacrifice for Torah mitzvahs. What does it Rebbe mean? The L'chayre beim Rebbe is doch in jenes Manim Gewen that inyan for Mesiras Nefesh bepoil. By the Rebbe in those times, there was the idea of literally and actually there was Mesiras Nefesh. Unafilo zitzendik in Tfisa, even while he was sitting in jail and later on, Izafila mizol zogen, even if you're going to say as mitzad der anove from the Rebbe, because of the humility of the Rebbe, hoter gehalten, he was of the opinion, azay Mesiras Nefesh is nit gleich, that his self-sacrifice does not compare to the Mesiras Nefesh. When I was saying to the self-sacrifice of our fathers, but he didn't have to say it in a language. However, he does say, Hagam mir seinen doch nicht leicht zu Aviseinu, welche seine Gewinn, weil Mesiras Nefesh pel mamish. He says that we're not compared to them. He's not just saying that they had more Mesiras Nefesh, less Mesiras. They had Mesiras Nefesh. Actually, they said, was the Sholing Ganzen the Mesiras Nefesh pel mamish, that rejects, negates Mesiras Nefesh in actuality, when the Friedrich Rebbe had actual Mesiras Nefesh. What is he saying? They actually had Mesiras Nefesh b'poil. He doesn't have Mesiras Nefesh b'poil. So what does this mean? Yud Aleph. Is there being in them explanation based upon the Rebbe's Sikha that the Rebbe explained? The Rebbe would give out the Inyan. The Rebbe wanted to accomplish the idea that Hageula, he wanted to have the idea of redemption by Ali, by all Yid. These euch by diva seinen nor b'shem Yisrael Yichuna. Even to those that just are called by the name Yisrael, they don't have any other connection, real connection. They're called Jews. Und der Rebbe hat gebracht davke dem Loshen HaPosek, and that's why he specifically brought this language of the Posek. Yehi Havai Elokeinu imonu, and he added, Hashem will be with us, b'derei sofer, Hagam zayin doch gleich zu Aviseinu g'imkulu, although we're not compared to our fathers. This haste. He was talking basically not about himself, he was talking about all Yidden. Also those Yidden who are not compared to our fathers, they don't have the idea of self-sacrifice actually on Torah mitzvahs. So they too should have that level, that Hashem Elokeinu should be imonu like he was with our father. Well, and based on the above, As the Rebbe had gewollt oistan the Geula, that the Rebbe wanted to accomplish the redemption. Oich by Divo Zainen Nor B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna, also by those that are just called Yisrael, nit kukundik of their matzah v'shmiras ha'Torah mitzvahs, notwithstanding their standing in observance of Torah mitzvahs, kemen zogen. So we can say, as Miderei Sofer, when he added, Hagam seinen doch nit gleich, so Avi Seinu. What does he mean when he said we're not compared to our father? Or the Rebbe gemeint Merame sein zum Pirush HaMedrash. He wanted a hint to the interpretation of the Medrash. Medrash says, V'chein shloime oimer lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shloime says before Hashem, Melech shehu soicher po'alim. V'heim oisim malachtom yofem. Hired workers. The workers do a good job. Do a beautiful job. The Noislam Schor, when he pays them the reward for doing a good job. Ma shevach yesh lemelech. Kind of praise. You paid the worker for the king. You paid the worker. They did a good job. You paid them. They must know meshubach. What is the praise of the king? Sheyizker poyalim roim. When you hire bad workers, shein oisim malachtom, they don't do their work. The Noislam Schor may still gives them their pay. This is a great benefit, and the Medrash concludes with Yihi Hashem Elikenu Imonu Kasher Hoyu Imavisenu. Should be with us. We're bad workers. May Hashem still be with us as He was with our fathers. The says that Gevot Oifton Inyan Hageula. He wanted to accomplish that the redemption should be also by the bad workers. Those who are Poilim Roim. Is based. Can explain as in dem Inyan von Yehi Havaya Lekein Monu Goimer Zainen Do Drei Madreges. There's still 3 steps. We can say that they're similar to the 3 steps that were talked about before. Aleph, Havaya Elikenu. Havaya Vert Elikenu. Which means that the Eibishter is Kechenu v'Chayusenu. The Eibishter is our power and our energy, our life force was those weist. That points as the Ganzem Itzias und der Menschen is sein Kayach v'Chayus v'Golus. And his open power and energy openly is Elokus. That's godliness. Level number 1. Level number 2 base. Hashem Elokeinu Imonu. Monu means the mensch is via Zachfar Zich. He is like a separate, a matter by himself. Nor that Eibishter is mit him, but the Eibishter is with him. But those gufa was Elokeinu is imonu. The fact that Elokeinu is with him is araya is verbunden mit Elokus. That is evidence that he's connected with godliness. And number 3, al yazveinu v'al yichenu. Don't neglect us. Don't let us go. Kedei oifzuton oichen azelche iden. Also to accomplish by such yidin v'zayne mebechinas tachtoinim mamish. We're on the level of Mamash Tachtonim B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna. They're just called Yisrael. Was says Zetzich by Ze Klaunit on Ze Shaychus Telekus, that you cannot tell at all by them their connection to godliness. As Oich by Ze Zol Zayin that in Agula, they too should have the idea of redemption. Or the Rebbe Meisig given. That's why the Rebbe added Kasher Hoye Imay Veseinu. Hagam Mirzayin Nidlach Veseinu. As we were our fathers, even though we're not like our father. He meant to hint on the interpretation of the Medrash. And that way he accomplished. Also by these bad workers. So Zayin al Koponim, the Hergesh von al Yazvenu al Yichena, at least they should feel not neglected and not given up on. As euch wie sie seinen in them matzev, even as they are in that situation. So sich unsehen, it should be sensed as they seinen chas v'sholim nicht abgesundert, that they're not, God forbid, separated and verlosen and neglected from Eberstein by Hashem. And in them, davke drickt sich ois, and in this specifically expresses itself, and also those was eine tachtonim, in their mitzias anire vanilas, their open, visible, and appearance, that they too seine shaykh tzalakus, that they are also connected to godliness. As in welcher madrega gefindt sich nur, in any level that a Jew finds himself, is ein emisser pnimisdike mitzias elakus, that his true and inner existence, godliness, even in that, that's in the lowest level. Was shown from Rebbe, and using the language of the Rebbe called Ish Yisrael. Every Jewish person, without consideration of his personal standing, how much he keeps and observes mitzvahs, still his heart is complete with Hashem and his Torah. And this impacted euch of the tachtonim world, also on the lower world. Even those that arrested him. As euch that also in their standing, in their situation. So they maskiv sein zu der Afotzas HaTorah from Rebbe. They should agree to the dissemination of the Torah of the Rebbe. This to help them to the extent that they help in sein Bafrayim and his redemption, Ula Kipshuta, and the freedom literally. In Gimel, since we remember these days, these as Vinasim, and then they actually take place at Yeder und Allah, each one and everyone, Imonu, with us, the Eiro Nesinas Koyach from Gimel Tammuz, the lesson and the power that we've been given from the 3rd of Tammuz, if nispol them, not to become impacted from obstacles and things that prevent on disseminating, spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit. When they also have the promise in the Zweiter of Taish in Yihi, as the second interpretation, not a request but a promise. He will be Al Yazvenu Val Yicheni. He won't neglect us, let us go. As it will be fulfilled as Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Imanu. Hashem our God will be with us, Kasher Hoyim Avisenu, as he was with our fathers. Al Yazvenu, won't neglect us, Val Yichenu, won't let us go. For all Jewish people, there will be light spiritually and physically. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Korach Gimel Tammuz Tavshin Chav Dalet Yutes Kislev Tavshin Chav Gei Chav Hei and Yom Gimel Parshas Korach Tavshin Lamed Zayin.